Good morning. I've been lulled into a very false sense of security because the speakers yesterday made this look very easy. So, yes, my name's Siobhan. I am a research midwife in Glasgow and I've been doing so for 2.5 years. So I am going to talk about, the focus of my poster was the research that we do in NICU. So first of all, I want to kind of highlight a little bit about the neonatal unit in Glasgow, just give you a little bit of background. So Royal Hospital for Children Glasgow is a level 3 unit. We have 50 cots. There are other 2 neonatal units in Glasgow, and in 2023 we see over 900 admissions, which is a lot of babies. Staffing wise, we have over 150 nurses, we have over 50 medical staff, and that ranges from FY2 up to consultancy. So as you can imagine, it's a lot of staff. They work shift patterns, they are part-time, it's a very large team with 24/7 ad hoc recruitment. So our background and aims. And everybody loves a picture of babies. So there are many populations that are underserved in research, but neonatal is most definitely one of them. They are a very vulnerable population. They're a high risk, it's a very busy environment, and our staff have a variety of competing priorities in NICU, but we all know that good quality research informs best practice. So our aims. So this is ultimately what we want for NICU. We want to embed research into routine care. We want to optimise recruitment, but the most important part is to strengthen our families' opportunities to take part in the clinical research. Everybody should be given the opportunity to take part. So our methods and analysis. We have a reproductive health and childbirth team, and it consists of mostly midwives, but we do have a nurse and we have a paediatric clinical fellow to give that full complement of disciplines. We have worked really hard to build therapeutic relationships with our clinical counterparts, so that involves formal face-to-face training. We're part of the multidisciplinary meetings. Regular, they do 10-minute talks after their handovers, so we come in, we'll update them on each study, how well they're doing, tips and hints. Simulations for some of our studies, and I think for the most part the most important thing is that consistency and familiar presence in NICU. That consistency and familiar presence in NICU. They know who I am, they know what I'm there for, and that's an extended part of their team. And we do audit and surveys as well. So we'll survey our staff because we want to know, well, what can we do to help you? What can be done better? What would you like from us? So the analysis part, this is a very detailed diagram, but this is just to show you that from identifying that a mother has been admitted to recruitment end, there are so many bits to follow, and there's so many areas. So, are our parents approachable? Are they well enough? Do we have deferred consent? Do we have, is there somebody on the delegation log present? Are the research team present? So there's so many avenues that can go down. So for our clinical staff, it's not just a case of, okay, baby's eligible, we'll recruit. There's a lot to go through as well. And I love this little diagram because it shows you all the potentials for poor engagement with clinical research. And we work very hard to try and combat these as much as possible. And I think the most difficult ones that are hard to overcome is to do with our participants and families. This is a really emotionally difficult time. You're approaching people at their most vulnerable, probably the most stressful time of their lives. And for acuity, lack of time, competing clinical tasks very much for our staff. So interventions and outcomes. So I've got a little different pictures. I'm just going to talk them through. So obviously we audit our staff, but we are at the beginning of the process of auditing our families and our parents. We want to know, how did you feel about research? How did you feel about being approached? Would you do it again? How do you feel about deferred consent? So we're at the beginning of that process. I really look forward to hearing that because, like we were just discussing, this is the population we serve. Their opinion matters. The little laptop picture is we in the NICU have developed a video, and it's a kind of virtual tour of the NICUs. Some NICUs have already adopted. And it is fantastic. It shows parents the sights and sounds of NICU, and they asked if I would do a short segment about research, which was very flattering. But it's to give that awareness to all parents who can access this video, that research is part of our unit. you may be approached if your baby is eligible. And the great thing about it is that it can be done in different languages. So you can hear me speaking in French and Spanish in my own accent. And they'll hopefully and they'll hopefully increase the number of languages so that every parent who watches it, at least it can start a conversation about research. They know that research is there. The bottom picture is a simulation, take our Polar simulation. So Polar is one of our NICU studies, and it is very much a practical-based intervention. And we find that simulating it through with our staff is far more beneficial for their learning rather than reading pages and pages of how to do something. Actually physically doing it is far more beneficial. The middle picture is deferral of consent, which I've kind of touched upon. We use deferral of consent for 2 out of 3 of our NICU studies. When Polar came along, they had deferred consent right from the start. And I won't lie, we were all a bit apprehensive. I'm like, okay, I'm not sure how we feel about this. But it has proved to be an amazing tool. And one of our other consultants asked our CI for SURS Up, why don't we use deferred consent for this? This is an emergency medicine, why don't we use it for this? And she worked very hard, and we now have deferral of consent for SURS Up. And since introducing it, over 48% of our consents have been through deferral. So it just goes to show how important babies we would have missed had we not had it. The upper picture is obviously in our classroom in NICU, and it's just to show, obviously, to kind of highlight the teaching that we do, where it's constant teaching. Our doctors rotate in and out of NICU, so we're always kind of teaching and updating our staff. And if you can imagine, as a consultant on NICU, and you have 28 very sick babies, and one of them is eligible for potentially two studies, and each study has a different eligibility criteria, it has a different consent process. How are they supposed to remember all that? So our posters in NICU are just to keep our staff right when we aren't there and keep them well informed. And obviously the bottom picture is our regular kind of presentation updates and keep with our staff too. So this slide was just to show, basically the first one is a graph shown of each study. So we have Feed 1, we have Polar, and we have SURS Up. And this is a number of delegated clinicians on our delegation logs when the study opened and where they are now. So as you can see, like I said, our doctors rotate in and out, but we always consistently have more and more staff joining our delegation logs, which you need. Our studies are ad hoc, they're 24/7. You need lots of medical staff on your delegation logs in order for the study to work. The recruitment chart was mostly just to focus on not so much numbers, but just to show you that the recruitment is continued. When I started, we were doing Feed 1 and Mom, the Mom incubator study. Mom has now finished. But it's just to show you that linear graph that recruitment is good. We've not had any drop-offs, and it's a sustained recruitment. And the feedback at the bottom was actually from some of our anonymous feedback from our clinical staff for our first survey, which was very nice to hear that we're making a difference and that we are supporting them. And at our most recent survey of the NICU clinicians, this is the lovely feedback that we received in the survey, which was, they took the time to write this, and it was kind of hitting home, actually, which became very emotional, that, that I am doing my job right, I am giving them support, and that's ultimately my goal. That is exactly what I want for them. It's quite detailed. I'll give you a second if you want to read it. But ultimately, I'm just going to move on to conclusions and acknowledgements. So we have substantial numbers of clinical staff on our delegation logs, and like I said, it's essential. We have to have that. At admission of our babies, if they are eligible for a study, it is a routine consideration now, which was exactly what we wanted. We want straight off the mark, if these babies are eligible, our staff are identifying, and they're very, very good at it. We have sustained recruitment, as you can see from our graphs. Positive feedback from our staff, and despite having 3 studies at the moment with overlapping pools of eligible babies, our portfolio is expanding with several studies and set up, which just goes to show that this collaborative approach that we have with NICU is key for success. We need them to do the research, and they need our support to kind of get them through it as well. So I just want to say thank you to all the families that have allowed their babies to be part of our research. But also, thanks very much. But also a big thank you to the NICU staff. They It is a privilege to work with them and a delight. I love the research that I do in NICU, and I am so grateful to be a part of it. So big thank you to them and their hard work. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got lots of questions, so we might not have time for all more. So apologies if you sent them in. With so many clinicians in the team and all the delegation logs to be done, how do you keep up with the training logs for things like amendments and practicalities of running it so closely with the clinical team?
It is difficult, I'll have to admit. It's just good regular communication. Like our training logs and our delegations logs are very long. I actually have a Word document on my own files of all my clinicians when their CVs and GCPs expire. So I think it's just trying to keep on top of it, and also building that rapport with them that you can easily contact them and keep the lines of communication open. So I think it's just being good organisation and having I'm very lucky that I have a very good team to work with.
You mentioned deferred consent. How do families feel about being recruited and then consented later?
It's actually very interesting. Like I said, when deferred consent came along, we were a bit unsure of it. We were thinking along of a parent's mindset, like how would you feel if you recruited your baby to a study and then asked for consent later? For Polar, we have recruited 11 babies and 8 of them have been recruited via deferred consent. These babies are born between 24 and 29 weeks. They are very vulnerable and we don't have the opportunity to approach parents beforehand. And I think when you're upfront and honest, when you go to see a parent, and there's been situations where I've went to speak to parents and they have nothing about the study involvement, so I'm the first person telling them, it's just being honest and saying that I would have approached you antenatally, but it wasn't appropriate. It wasn't appropriate, ethically it wasn't right, and we would have been delaying your baby's treatment. And parents are very much understanding, like, well, thank you for not delaying our baby's treatment. And so far, touch wood, all of our parents have given deferred consent for Sursub and Polar. So, yeah.
The introduction to the video sounds fantastic. What feedback have you received from the families on the video so far?
So the video is imminently about to go out, and it will be on the Children's Hospital website for NICU. So that is still very much new. I was given permission, I can't talk about it. That's just about to go out imminently. So we'll be waiting to hear back of parents' kind of thoughts and feedback about that.
What's been the most successful strategy for recruitment so far?
I think what we do as a team is that we screen our kind of inpatients every single day. I screen every single day for our mums that are admitted and babies that are admitted. And I think that's key, of knowing who is in the hospital. You can't predict who's going to come in, but if you know who's around, and then I can link in with my clinical team, I'll email our PIs, our chief investigator, and say, can I approach this lady? And we start the ball rolling. But our staff are that good that they will have already went to speak to mum and dad. They have given the leaflet and they're just showing, can you come over and follow up and maybe ask for consent? So I think it's just about pulling out all the stops to identify who is eligible and getting in early so that you can approach people beforehand.
We've got one more question. I'm afraid it's a difficult one.
Oh, thanks, guys.
Tricky one. Which is, what's your processes around things like bereavement consent? Because it is a highly intensive area.
So we have never been in a situation where we have had to get deferral of consent after a baby has died. So that is still something we've got to come up against. I think in that situation I would lean probably quite a lot on my PIs. They are neonatal consultants, they deal with this sadly, and I think we would be good at supporting each other. And sadly in NICU, and definitely in our research, babies do pass. But I think it's the team pulled together, and regardless if it's research or not, I imagine them just be supporting each other. Yeah. Glad it's done.